You want to talk about DNA test? You want to talk about MyHeritage? Let's get to work. As you all know, I took my heritage DNA test a couple of months back, and since then I've made many videos about it, which people love to join in the conversation and learn each other's stories. Well, it's funny because, as you all know, I always thought I was a quarter Italian and a quarter Mexican and mostly German or whatever on my dad's side, which the test revealed that was not the case, especially when you combine it with what my mom's test showed, which was actually that instead of being Italian on that side, one grandparent that moved here from Italy was Sephardic Jewish and the other was apparently mostly Middle Eastern. So not only do I have Spanish because I'm Mexican, but I've also got it from another set of grandparents. One was Sephardic Jewish. So basically Jewish via Spain kind of situation. And they ended up in Italy and came to America about 100 years ago. So knowing all that, though, clearly though, I'm definitely a quarter Mexican, even though Mexican isn't a race. So it broke down to be something to the effect of over 30% Spanish. It was 33% Spanish and 23% Central American. But either way, I'm undeniably at least a quarter Spanish, depending on which test you look at. When you combine the Mexican part of me and the Sephardic Jewish part, it's kind of murky, but undeniably, a good amount of me is, and depending on how you want to argue it, Spanish, Latino, Hispanic, however you want it, I don't care. I know the difference between all the terms and I don't even care. Okay? My point is, compared to an average American who's mainly Anglo-Saxon, I'm a guy who's got a major amount of my DNA which goes back to Spain to some degree. Okay? So however you want to, and see, I think it's not only confusing for me, but I don't think anyone can really get that right to determine what I should be considered, other than just generically calling me white. But what I want to share with you today is I had to do the census for my family yesterday. We had some trouble doing it online, so then I had to call. 53 minutes I spent doing the census for the American household thing, whatever. And they have many questions about ethnicity, and not only ethnicity but race. So they separate them. They want to know what your race is, they want to know your ethnicity, and they want to know that for every member of your family. So it was very interesting and confusing trying to explain, because ultimately it's not a matter of what I actually am or what everybody else sees that I am, but it's a matter of how I identify, how I self-identify my race and my ethnicity. But they explicitly ask you questions about this, and for me, about my wife and my kids. So she started by asking me, do I identify as white, Hispanic, Native American, African American? She goes through, I don't know, like 5 different things. And I said, well, I can't deny that definitely a good amount of me is of Spanish descent. So I guess I'll identify as Hispanic. So that's what I said. Because that was for ethnicity, when she asked ethnicity. But then I said, well, but I'm also part Middle Eastern and Jewish, and as well as European. I said, so, but yeah, let's just put me down as Hispanic. That's what I said. I was like, I don't know. It felt weird to just say that I was white of European descent. I felt weird because knowing that definitely there's Spanish. So I just went ahead and said Hispanic. To me, that was the closest thing that made sense. So I just went with that. Well, then of course they asked about my, and then they asked about, after the ethnicity, then they asked about my race. So then I said white. Because I'm like, I've done enough videos on this channel. You guys see me as a white guy. So even with the Middle Eastern, Jewish, and Central American that I've got going on, ultimately I'm still a white guy. My race is that I'm white, even though I'm in those other things too. So I don't know. I figured that was the best way to do it. To say I'm Hispanic, but then I'm white. So that's what I went with. But it was funny though, because then they asked the same questions about my wife, who she hasn't taken the test yet, but her mother is apparently half Italian and half Croatian. So we know that much. But nothing of any kind of Spanish descent or African or anything explicitly different than European. So I said, well, my wife is white. And then it was time for my kids. So, of course, my kids are arguably half of whatever I am. Knowing that I definitely am part Hispanic, Spanish, Latino, however politically correct the term is supposed to be for whatever situation. I don't even care. So anyway, but for my kids, I just said European. I said for both of them, they're European. I just left it at that. I was like, even though they're also part Latino or whatever, and all those other things, I just said European white. So it's confusing, and it's all a matter of perception. The way you perceive it is what you are. I mean, I was at an HR class a couple years ago, and they were talking about this, and how they were saying how whatever you are ethnically, that's one thing, but it's a whole other thing as far as what race that you see yourself as. And they, like for example, here, especially here in Tennessee, you'll see a lot of this. There are white families who will adopt Asian daughters. So they're from China, they're from Korea. So here in Tennessee, with country music and Southern accents, you'll see these Southern parents with their very undeniably Asian looking daughters, and as they grow up, their culture just like the parents would be. You know, it's not like they have an Asian accent or anything, or they necessarily have Asian preferences for food or whatever. They grew up white. They grew up Tennessee. So ultimately, when that daughter grows up to be an adult, she gets to decide how she identifies. Even though she's ethnically Asian, she may identify as white as far as her culture goes. And that's not just for Asian, it could go for anything. It's all about how you identify and that perception. So anyway, I thought this was an interesting situation. This just happened last night with the Census Bureau. I thought, hey, this would be a cool story to share. And I think it also lends to you telling me if you've had a similar situation like this, where you're confused on how to identify as far as your race versus your ethnic background.